The station shuddered, the lights flickering as explosions rocked the outer hull. Captain Elias Steele's boots echoed on the cold, metallic floor as he moved swiftly through the narrow corridor, his pulse steady despite the chaos around him. He'd been in worse situations before. Much worse. But this was the last stand. Captain? Sergeant Lila Stroud's voice crackled through his calm. We've got incoming from the south wing. Zarnak's already breached in the airlocks. Understood, Sergeant. Steele's voice was calm, a reflection of years of fighting in hell. Hold them as long as you can. I'll be there in 5. He didn't wait for a response. His mind was already calculating the next move as he rounded the corner and entered the command deck. The officers at their stations barely acknowledged his presence, too busy trying to keep the station's systems intact. But Steele didn't need their attention. His eyes locked onto the tactical display. Zarnak warships surrounded them like vultures circling a carcass. The station, once a symbol of humanity's last line of defense, was now a dying star in the galaxy's void. The alien fleet had the upper hand. Again. We've got to buy more time, Steele muttered to himself. He tapped a button on the console, pulling up the defensive grid. It was a broken mess, but there was still hope. If he could get to the outer defense ring and activate the last remaining long-range turrets, it might give his team a chance to regroup. Lieutenant, prep the fighters. I'll need them to cover us, Steele ordered, his tone never wavering. Yes, sir, came the quick response from Lieutenant Shaw, a young officer with nerves of steel but a face that still carried the scars of their earlier defeats. Steele's hand hovered over the console. He knew what he was about to do could be a one-way ticket to the next life, but they didn't have time to second-guess. The Zarnak would push forward, relentless and merciless, unless humanity made a stand. It was either now or never. He turned and sprinted back down the corridor, his mind focused on the task ahead. A sudden jolt threw him off balance, and the overhead lights blinked out entirely, replaced by the harsh red glow of emergency lights. There was no time to waste. Stroud, report! He barked into his comms. Captain, we've lost the north airlock. Zarnak forces are through. I don't know how much longer we can hold. Her voice was tight, almost strained. Damn it! Steele cursed under his breath. He didn't need to ask the obvious. He knew exactly what that meant. The south wing, the only remaining secure section, would fall in minutes. The station was crumbling, the last remnants of humanity's defense about to be swallowed whole by the alien invaders. Fall back, Stroud, he ordered. Regroup at the secondary command post. We need to buy more time. We're moving out now, she snapped. Steele could almost hear the grit in her voice. But before she could sign off, the line crackled with static. Then a voice, distorted and mechanical, cut through the noise. This is Overlord XYRAC. Your resistance is futile, human. Surrender, and your deaths will be swift. Steele clenched his jaw. XYRAC, the Zarnak ruler, a beast of monstrous proportions. The same voice he'd heard in nightmares, taunting him across the vast emptiness of space. I don't take orders from monsters, Steele growled, slamming his fist onto the console. We will never surrender. Before he could cut the comm, XYRAC's voice returned, mocking and cold. Your defiance is amusing. But not for long. Steele's heart pounded in his chest, but he couldn't afford to show weakness. He had one objective now, get to the defense ring, and keep pushing forward. The Zarnak had underestimated humanity's resolve before. They wouldn't make that mistake again. He entered the auxiliary hall, and the air felt thick, oppressive, as though the very station was dying around him. The walls were scarred with burn marks from previous skirmishes, and the occasional muffled explosion rattled the entire structure. He kept his head low, his senses sharp. At the end of the corridor, the sealed blast door to the defense ring waited, a final barrier to the alien onslaught. Steele reached the door and quickly keyed in the override sequence. The heavy door hissed and groaned, struggling against the damage sustained in the ongoing assault. When it finally slid open, he found Lieutenant Shaw already standing by the terminal, his eyes scanning the monitors. We've got incoming, Captain. Big ships, biggest I've ever seen, Shaw reported. Steele nodded, barely registering the gravity of the statement. His mind was already on the task at hand. Activate the long-range turrets. Now. The lieutenant's fingers flew across the console, and Steele could see the slight tremor in his hands. Even the most seasoned soldiers had their moments. But Steele knew this man would hold the line. They all would. A loud bang echoed through the station as the first Zarnak ship unleashed a salvo of plasma fire, sending tremors through the deck. Shaw gripped the console, his knuckles turning white, but he didn't flinch. It's done, sir. Turrets are online. Steele's gaze hardened. He'd made his choice. There was no turning back now. They had the firepower. Now it was time to use it. He stepped up to the terminal, his voice low but resolute. Prepare for full defense protocols. We're going to give them hell. The exterior cameras flickered to life on the screen, revealing the incoming Zarnak ships closing in. Their black, insectoid hulls gleamed in the dim light of space, monstrous and deadly. Steele's fingers tightened into fists as he watched them. We might be outnumbered, he muttered to himself. But they don't know what they're up against. The first volley of Zarnak fire hit the station's outer defenses. Shields flared and flickered under the barrage, but they held, just barely. Now! Steele shouted. Shaw's hands slammed down on the console. Turrets on the outer ring of the station powered up, their massive barrels turning towards the oncoming ships. The first shot tore through the vacuum of space, a brilliant streak of energy that collided with the closest Zarnak vessel. It shattered into a burst of fire, but the alien fleet was relentless. Steele watched, eyes narrowing. This wasn't a victory yet. But it was the first blood. The first step in reclaiming humanity's future. As the first wave of Zarnak ships began to retaliate, Steele knew one thing for sure: humanity's fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. The command post was a maze of flickering screens, dim lighting, and the low hum of machinery that no longer seemed to care whether they were alive or dead. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burnt wires and scorched metal, remnants of the battle that had torn through the station. Captain Elias Steele stood in front of the tactical display, staring at the map of the battle unfolding across Earth's orbit. The Zarnak fleet had retreated momentarily, but Steele knew it was only temporary. They were regrouping, preparing for the final push. Captain, we've received new intel, Sergeant Stroud said, her voice tight over the comm. Steele didn't take his eyes off the map. What's the update? There's a mole in the ranks, she replied. We've traced transmissions to one of our own officers. They're feeding the Zarnak our positions. The words hit Steele like a blow to the gut. He'd suspected something was off ever since the traitor's voice had crackled over the comms during the battle. The Zarnak knew too much, too quickly. This wasn't just a chance encounter. Someone inside was feeding them information. Who's the source? Steele's voice was low but filled with ice-cold fury. We're not sure yet. But we have a short list. The traitor is high-ranking, Stroud continued. I'll have a team investigate the officers right away. Get to it, Steele ordered, his jaw tightening. Betrayal was one thing they couldn't afford. Every soldier, every officer, every life on this station depended on absolute trust. Steele turned from the display, pacing. The Zarnak weren't just an external threat. This attack was being aided from within. If they didn't root out the traitor fast, their fragile defense would crumble. They needed to act swiftly, but carefully. The last thing they could afford now was infighting. Captain? A voice broke his thoughts. Lieutenant Shaw stood in the doorway, his face drawn, his eyes bloodshot from exhaustion. The turrets are running low on power. We need to start conserving energy, or we'll be out of ammo before the next wave hits. I'm aware, Steele said, his tone tight. He glanced back at the map, his mind calculating their next move. The Zarnak were massing again, and Steele knew that when they came, they wouldn't stop until the station was ashes. He'd need more than a handful of turrets to keep them at bay. We need a counter-offensive, Steele muttered. We can't just wait for them to break through our lines. Shaw looked doubtful. A counteroffensive would take time, Captain. The fleet's already spread thin. We don't have the luxury of numbers. We don't need numbers, Steele said, his voice sharpening. We need a distraction. Something big enough to force them to split their forces. Shaw raised an eyebrow. A distraction? You're not suggesting. I am. We'll deploy the last of the reserve fighters. Pull them off the station. The Zarnak are expecting us to defend here. What if we hit them where they least expect it? Shaw hesitated. The idea was dangerous, but Steele's eyes were hard with determination. They had no choice but to take risks. It's risky, but I'll prep the fighters, Shaw said. Do it. And make sure your people are ready. We're going to need them for the next phase. Steele turned, his gaze narrowing as he walked back to the central terminal. He pulled up a new set of coordinates on the display, scanning the data with practiced precision. There was one last ace they hadn't played yet, the Blacklight Protocol. It was humanity's final gambit, a weapon built in secret and only revealed to the highest-ranking officers. A weapon designed to wipe out the Zarnak threat once and for all. But it wasn't perfect. And it came with a risk far greater than anything they'd faced so far. Captain, I've got the list. Stroud's voice cut through the silence. Steele snapped his attention to the comm. We've isolated the officer, Commander Marius. Steele's heart sank. Marius had been with him from the start. They'd fought side by side in dozens of campaigns. He never suspected the man would betray them. Where is he now? Steele asked, his voice dangerously calm. We've tracked his last transmission. He's en route to the lower deck. Lock down all access points to the lower decks. He doesn't leave there alive, Steele ordered. He turned to Shaw. Get your people down there. Secure the area. If Marius makes it out of this station, the Zarnak will have all the intel they need to wipe us out. I'll take care of it, Shaw replied. He paused, eyes briefly meeting Steele's. Are you sure about this? Steele didn't hesitate. It's the only way. He watched as Shaw left, the door closing behind him with a sharp hiss. Steele turned back to the terminal, his fingers hovering over the controls. A moment of silence passed as the weight of his decision settled on him. They were walking a razor's edge. One misstep, and humanity's last hope would fall. Suddenly the alarms blared, louder, more urgent than before. Zarnak vessels incoming! The voice of the station's radar officer echoed over the comms. Multiple contacts, large ships. Damn it, Steele muttered, slamming his fist on the table. The Zarnak weren't waiting. They were coming for the kill. The countdown to the final battle had begun. He grabbed his helmet from the table, securing it over his head. His reflection stared back at him in the black visor. He wasn't ready to die, not today, not like this. Not with his people scattered, his soldiers vulnerable, and Earth's last hope hanging by a thread. Captain, Marius is on the move. Stroud's voice came again, and Steele could hear the edge of panic in her tone. We've got confirmation. He's... The line went dead. The silence was deafening. Stroud? Steele's voice was low and filled with rage. Answer me. But there was no response. Without thinking, Steele bolted from the room, his mind racing. Marius was no longer just a traitor. He was a ticking bomb, and the station was about to blow. Steele needed to stop him before everything collapsed. He raced through the station, his boots pounding against the metal floors as the alarms screamed in his ears. The Zarnak were closing in fast. But the traitor had to be stopped first. The hallway ahead was a blur as he pushed forward, the weight of the mission bearing down on him with every step. Whatever happened next, it would be their last chance. He wasn't going to let humanity fall, not on his watch. The lower deck of the station was a shadowed labyrinth of rusted pipes, flickering emergency lights, and abandoned equipment. Captain Elias Steele moved silently through the maze, his footsteps muffled by the hum of failing generators. His breath was steady, his focus unshaken. But beneath the calm exterior, the weight of the situation bore down on him. Marius. The man he had trusted, fought beside, bled with. Steele couldn't fathom it. The thought of betrayal twisted like a knife in his gut. Yet there was no time for doubt, no room for second-guessing. Marius had to be stopped. He was more than a traitor now, he was a direct line to the Zarnak. The comms crackled in his ear. "Captain, Stroud here. The Zarnak fleet is closing in on the station. They'll be in firing range in less than 15 minutes. You don't have much time." "I know," Steele replied, his voice clipped. His eyes flicked to the side as he passed an old maintenance hatch, the air growing thick with the stench of ozone and burnt circuitry. "I'm going after Marius. Make sure the fighters are prepped. We're going to need every last scrap of firepower. You heard him, people. Get moving!" Stroud's voice barked over the comm. "Captain, we'll hold the line here. Get that traitor." The door ahead of Steele slid open with a low groan, revealing a long corridor lined with the dim red glow of emergency lighting. Steele's pulse quickened. Marius was close. He could feel it in his bones. His boots echoed softly as he moved forward, his eyes scanning the hallway, watching for any sign of movement. The tension in the air was palpable. Every step, every turn, every fleeting shadow could be the end of him. He was walking into a trap. Steele knew that. But if Marius was as cunning as he suspected, then the traitor was counting on him to hesitate, to second-guess. Steele couldn't afford that. He couldn't afford to fail. A sudden burst of static interrupted the silence. "Captain," came the crackling voice of Shaw. "We've got the fighters ready to deploy, but you need to hurry. The Zarnak are almost in range. We can't hold them off for much longer." "Understood," Steele said, his voice cold, unwavering. "Keep them distracted for as long as you can. I'm going in." The corridor ahead narrowed, and Steele's hand instinctively gripped the hilt of his sidearm. The dark passage loomed, the end barely visible in the dim light. He couldn't afford to be careless, not now, not when everything was on the line. He moved like a ghost, his body tense, every sense straining to catch even the faintest sound. Then he heard it. A whisper, barely audible, echoing from around the corner. Steele's heart skipped a beat. He didn't need to hear more. "Marius." Steele stepped forward, turning the corner just in time to see the traitor slip into a side room. His pace quickened, a burst of adrenaline pushing him forward. He moved silently, his breath steady, his mind focused. This was it. The door to the side room was already partially open. Steele's hand shot out, grabbing the edge and pulling it wide. Marius was there, standing by a communications terminal, his back to Steele. The traitor didn't seem to notice, his fingers dancing across the controls with practiced ease. "Stop right there, Marius!" Steele's voice was low but edged with fury. Marius froze. Slowly he turned, a cold smile spreading across his face. His eyes were empty, devoid of the warmth Steele had once trusted. The man he had known was gone, replaced by a creature of ice and calculation. "So, the mighty Captain Steele finally shows up," Marius sneered, his voice smooth, almost too calm. "You've taken your sweet time. But it's over. The Zarnak will win. You're too late." Steele's fingers twitched around his weapon. "You're the one who's too late, Marius. You've betrayed humanity, and now you'll pay for it." Marius chuckled darkly, his gaze never leaving Steele. "Oh, I'm not the one who betrayed anyone. You're the one who's too blind to see the truth. The Zarnak are inevitable. You can't stop them. You never could." Steele's jaw clenched. "You've been feeding them our positions. Giving them everything they need to destroy us." "Destroy you?" Marius scoffed. "No. I'm saving you. The Zarnak will reshape the galaxy, and I'm merely ensuring humanity survives. This war, this slaughter? It's pointless. You'll never win. You've lost your mind." Steele's voice dropped to a growl. "Humanity is worth fighting for. We are not just pawns in your twisted game. And you're wrong about one thing, Marius, this isn't over." Marius' eyes flickered for a brief moment, but the smile remained. "You're right. It's not over. But you're already too late. The Zarnak fleet is in position. They're launching their final strike. And when they do, this station will be dust. Your precious fighters won't make it. And neither will you. Steele's eyes hardened. His grip on his weapon tightened. He couldn't let this man's words infect him. We'll see about that. In a flash, Steele lunged forward, closing the distance between them. Marius's hand shot up, reaching for a weapon at his side, but Steele was faster. The blast of a shot rang out, but it missed wide as Steele knocked the weapon aside, his elbow slamming into Marius's chest. The traitor staggered back, a growl of frustration escaping his lips as he drew another weapon, a small, compact plasma blade. The glow of it cast an eerie light on his face. You think you can stop me with a gun? Marius sneered, stepping back and taking a defensive stance. Steele didn't waste words. He charged, his combat instincts taking over. The two collided, the clang of metal on metal filling the room as they fought. Steele's fist connected with Marius's jaw, sending him staggering, but Marius retaliated with a brutal strike to Steele's ribs. Pain flared, but Steele pushed through it, his mind locked on the mission. You betrayed everything we fought for. Steele spat, his voice hoarse with fury. Marius laughed. And you still don't understand, do you? This is bigger than you, Steele. Bigger than humanity. This is about survival. Survival? Steele grunted, his knee driving into Marius's stomach. We fight for more than that. They locked in a brutal struggle, each knowing only one of them would walk away. Steele's mind was a blur of rage and pain, but in that moment, all that mattered was the mission. The traitor had to be stopped, and Steele would make sure of it. With one final, decisive blow, Steele knocked Marius's weapon from his hand, sending it clattering to the floor. He stood over the traitor, breathing heavily, his eyes cold and unforgiving. Marius's face twisted in disbelief. You think you've won? Steele shook his head. No. I've just started. As Marius fell to the ground, Steele turned toward the terminal. The battle was far from over. The Zarnak were still coming, and humanity's last chance was slipping away. Steele didn't have time to mourn a fallen comrade. He had a war to finish. The countdown had begun. And Steele was determined to make every second count. The silence in the command room was deafening, save for the faint hum of dying machinery. Captain Elias Steele stood alone at the terminal, his back straight, hands clenched into fists at his sides. Marius's lifeless body was still behind him, a grim reminder of the price they'd paid to reach this point. He had stopped the traitor, but now the real battle loomed on the horizon. The Zarnak fleet was mere minutes away. Earth's last line of defense, this crumbling station, was their only hope. Yet, for all their firepower, Steele knew the truth, it wasn't enough. Not against the overwhelming might of the Zarnak. The terminal screen flickered as Stroud's voice crackled over the comms. Captain, we're holding as best as we can. The fighters are out, but we need a miracle to make it through this. Understood, Sergeant, Steele replied, his tone flat. Make sure the fighters keep the Zarnak busy. I'm initiating the Blacklight Protocol. Captain. Stroud's voice was laced with disbelief. Are you sure? That's a last resort. We don't know what it'll do. It could. I don't have a choice. Steele cut in, his jaw tight. The Zarnak are going to destroy us all. If we don't do this now, Earth won't have a future. Copy that, Stroud said, her voice strained. Good luck, sir. We'll hold the line as long as we can. Steele nodded, though he knew she couldn't see it. The Blacklight Protocol was a secret weapon humanity had developed in desperation. A massive energy release capable of obliterating everything in its path, but at a cost. The risk of triggering an uncontrollable chain reaction was too high. Yet, for Steele, there was no other choice. This was their final play. He typed in the access codes, his fingers moving with mechanical precision. As the sequence began, a low hum filled the room, followed by a soft whine as the station's remaining power reserves were diverted. The Blacklight Protocol was activating. The lights flickered, then steadied, casting harsh shadows across Steele's face. For a moment, he thought about everything that had led him here, the sacrifices, the lives lost, the constant struggle. Humanity had fought tooth and nail to survive, and now it all came down to this. The unknown. "Captain, the Zarnak are breaking through!" Shaw's voice rang through the comms. "We've lost the outer defenses. They're coming in full force." Steele's grip tightened on the console, his knuckles turning white. There was no more time for contemplation. This had to work. The hum from the station's core grew louder, more intense. Steele's vision blurred slightly, the pressure in the air thickening. The Blacklight Protocol was a force of unimaginable power. It wasn't meant to be used lightly. But now, it was their only hope. Suddenly, the terminal screen flickered again. This time, a new sequence appeared, one Steele hadn't authorized. His eyes widened. "No," he whispered, rushing toward the terminal. "This wasn't part of the plan." The message was clear: protocol initialization error. Fatal error, ***. Before Steele could react, a blinding light filled the room, and everything went dark. When Steele regained consciousness, he was lying on the cold metal floor of the command center, his head pounding and his vision blurry. For a few seconds he was disoriented, the world around him spinning. Slowly, he pushed himself up, wiping blood from his forehead. "Captain?" Stroud's voice filtered through the haze. "Stroud," Steele muttered, his voice hoarse. We're alive, sir." "But something's wrong," she said, her tone full of confusion. "The station, it's still intact. But the Zarnak ships, they're gone." Steele blinked, trying to focus on the screen in front of him. It took a moment for the data to process in his mind. The Zarnak fleet, once bearing down on them with terrifying force, was gone. Their ships had vanished without a trace. "What happened?" Steele demanded, struggling to his feet. He looked around, but the station seemed eerily still. The emergency lights were the only illumination, casting long shadows across the silent command center. "I don't know, sir," Stroud replied. "The entire fleet, they just faded out of existence. One moment they were there, and the next they were gone." Steele's heart raced. The Blacklight Protocol hadn't just stopped the Zarnak, it had obliterated them. Or had it? A terrible thought crept into his mind. What if they hadn't been destroyed at all? What if humanity had just triggered something much worse? "Shaw, what's the status of our fighters?" Steele asked, trying to steady his voice. "They're still in the air, Captain," Shaw answered, sounding relieved. "We've got some survivors. The Zarnak didn't leave without a fight, but they were forced to retreat when the protocol went off." Steele's hands tightened into fists. The immediate threat was over, but the victory felt hollow. There was no celebration, no relief. Only uncertainty. "Captain, there's something you need to see," Stroud said, her voice suddenly more urgent. Steele approached her, following her gaze to the terminal. The data scrolling across the screen made his blood run cold. It wasn't just the Zarnak fleet that had vanished. The entire sector, thousands of miles of space, was blank. No ships, no debris, no signs of the battle that had raged just moments before. "It's gone," Steele whispered, his heart pounding. "The entire sector." "Yes, sir," Stroud confirmed. "Like it never existed." Steele sank into a chair, his mind racing. The Blacklight Protocol hadn't just destroyed the Zarnak. It had erased them. But it hadn't stopped there. Something else was at work, something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. "We've unleashed something," Steele said, his voice barely above a whisper. "A weapon that doesn't just destroy, it rewrites reality." "Captain, we need to..." Stroud started, but she was cut off by a sudden, sharp crackle over the comms. "Captain Steele," a distorted voice said, the tone cold and unfeeling. "You have no idea what you've done." Steele's blood froze. It was the voice of the Zarnak overlord, XY-Rak. "You think you've won, human? You've merely triggered the awakening. Your so-called protocol was not a weapon. It was a beacon. And now, the true power of the black light is coming for you. The comms fell silent, and Steele felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. The Zarnak might be gone, but something far worse was emerging from the shadows. We've made a grave mistake, Steele muttered, as the station's lights flickered once again. Humanity had won the battle, but at what cost? The war was far from over.